So this morning I want to introduce someone to you who many of you will know. 20 years ago, when Elfie and I were part of the group starting Copper Hills, we decided that one teacher by the name of Clausen would be more than adequate for what we do here. And because the church it can't be focused around people. And so Elfie hasn't taught in the last 20 years, at least not on Sunday morning. And so a couple of weeks ago, I asked Elf if she would do that. And so she has been working at that and thinking about it. And so this morning, it's a real joy to introduce my wife, Elfie.
He's a little nervous, as he should be, because I've got tread marks on me from when he's thrown me under the bus.
After 20 years, there's a thing or two that you say. Some of it you regret.
A lot of it.
And sometimes you regret it more at some times than other times. Yeah, go for it.
So he's a little nervous today. I am extremely honored to be standing up here in front of you. I'm a little nervous, but I've been given my own little 20-minute time slot, and which is good that it's sort of short, because as I tell the girls as they book appointments for me at the office, I can only sound smart for so long. So, in fact, when I told our life group that Brad had asked me to speak, they were surprised, actually shocked. And I said, yeah, I think Brad realized that if God can speak through a donkey in the Old Testament, he can certainly trust God to speak through me. So, here we go. A while back, I chose a book off Brad's shelf by Dallas Willard. He's a philosopher, and he writes really pretty difficult books to understand, but this one was edited by somebody else, so it was a little bit more understandable, and it was on the 23rd Psalm. It talked about living with contentment and peace and security. It talked about living without fear no matter what circumstances you find yourself in and no matter where those circumstances are moving us to. I want to read that psalm for you this morning. You can close your eyes if you like, or you can follow along on the screen. Allow these words to slip past your defenses. Allow them to slip past your worries and concerns, and gently allow God to open your soul so you can hear his word as he speaks it into you. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. I was training to run long distances. Well, they were long distances for me, at the same time as I was memorizing this psalm. I remember reciting these verses so I would have something to think about when I wanted to quit running. And I said, he lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. God, would you renew my strength? In January, I made my goal of running 13 and a half miles on hills. And I continued to train for a full Tough Mudder in March. And despite not being able to complete some of the upper body challenges, I got a finisher shirt. Since I reached my running goals, and for the sake of a sore back, I've recently switched sports to cycling. And I was trying to figure out my next goal. When I heard about a retired couple that had driven bike across the States from San Diego to Myrtle Beach, I thought, They're retired, that means they're old. And I am much younger and certainly more fit. So if they can do all across the state, certainly I can go from Phoenix to San Diego. So that became my new goal. I started talking about my new goal because it's always important to let people know your goal. It holds you accountable. I have a bike. I think we bought it 10 years ago at a pawn shop. It has 6 speeds. It has really fat tires and it's heavy. I've never had a flat. I only have to puff up the tires when they really need air, and I don't usually change gears. I just pretend it's a single speed because it's easier that way. So when a friend suggested she had a bike that she was thinking of selling that I could borrow until I was certain this was my new sport, I jumped on that. Now this is a real bike. It is so light, I can easily lift it with one hand. It has these pencil-thin tires and multiple levels of gears. You can adjust everything for maximum comfort, which I would say is a relative term. My friend set up my new bike in my backyard on a trainer so I could practice clipping in and out of the pedals and changing gears without fear of potential falls. Just to get comfortable with the bike, she said. What's to get comfortable? It's a bike. Well, I practiced in my backyard for about 1.5 weeks before venturing out onto the street. I wasn't afraid on the trainer. I've never been afraid on my heavy, clunky bike because you can't go very fast and you're too tired from pedaling to be scared. But this new-to-me bike has created a whole new set of problems. I've moved on in Psalm 23 to even when I drive on the busiest streets in Phoenix, I will not be afraid. I will not be afraid. It's not working. I was told that the first lesson I need to learn is how to change a flat tire because I will have one. I live in constant fear of a flat tire. I imagine a horrific blowout where I lose control, can't clip out of my pedals, I fall over and a cement truck drives over me. My fear doesn't stop there. I've imagined all sorts of scenarios, like when you see a rock and you imagine that you hit it and you fell over. Yeah. All of which end up with me falling in front of large crowds and my bike is totaled. On Thursday, one of my patients came into the office and she had a broken elbow. Yeah. She broke it while she was riding her bike in a scenario that I haven't even imagined. If one could lose weight through fear alone, I would be skinny. Fear has the capacity to be crippling. It keeps us from spectacular experiences, and I hadn't realized what a lesson this would be for me. In May of 2006, during a period of 10 days, our oldest son, Aaron, graduated from university. He got married and he became a cop. Our second son, Matt, moved to California for an internship in the summer before returning to ASU for his junior year. And our youngest daughter, Katie, she graduated from high school and she was getting ready to head to ASU for her first year of university. And because that might not have been enough during those 10 days, I also quit my job so I could go back to school to become something. It was all very exciting and liberating until reality set in on the 1st of June, where I sat in my empty house trying to decide what I wanted to be when I grew up. To all who would have seen me, I would have seemed happy, confident, and hopeful. But inside, I was afraid. Afraid that I wasn't needed by my kids anymore. Afraid that I wouldn't make it in school. Afraid that I had no longer anything of value to offer anybody because my identity as a mom was over, really, and I didn't have a job, so my identity wasn't in my work. I chose to go to school to become a life coach. where I hope to help people age better and healthier. Because working in the medical field, I had seen how people age, and it was a lot easier for them when they were healthy as they aged. I had an idea of what a coach did, which was what was appealing to me for this new venture. A coach just tells people what to do and they do it. And I knew how that worked because I had been a fitness instructor and people always followed what I said to do. I went back to school for this life coach thing. A life coach is nothing like a football coach. We talked about things like awareness, choice, and trust, the science and art of working with people, and letting them come to their own point where they realized they had an issue, where they could realize they had a choice about that issue, and where they learned to trust that they could make the right choice. So that was good, and I now have the tools that I can follow when I talk to people about lifestyle change. But the best coach, the best teacher, the best encourager is God's Spirit who lives within those of us who we've given our lives to Him. It's He that changes us from the inside out, and with layers of lessons that He allows us to experience. And when we get to see those layers, it becomes really very exciting, as I've been able to watch these last couple of weeks. Let's circle back to Psalm 23. David starts this poem by acknowledging that the Lord is his shepherd. So, when we have a shepherd, that means that we're a sheep. And sheep aren't very smart. They have no long-term memory, or even short-term memory for that matter. Sheep are fully cared for by their shepherd. They're not in charge, and they don't have to worry about details. So if we're a sheep, all we have to do is follow the shepherd. And the natural thing is that we have all that we need. When David goes on to say that the shepherd lets us rest in green pastures and he leads us by quiet waters, that tells me that we are fully satisfied, we've eaten our fill, and we aren't thirsty. Jumping ahead to verse 4, David changes to a more personal tone. He says, even when I walk through the darkest valley, I won't be afraid because you are close beside me. The word that caught my attention here is even when I. He doesn't say if I walk through the darkest valley. He says when I walk through the darkest valley. And we are going to go through hard things. In fact, we might not know what to do, and we will truly experience some very frightening things. And when in the Bible, God tells us, I will be with you, most often it's preceded by the words, do not be afraid. Chronic fear would be an indicator of our lack of trust in God. If we truly believed that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, all-everything, there really would be nothing to be afraid of. Or if we could just grasp how deep His unfailing love is for us, we wouldn't be afraid. A couple of weeks ago, Brad and I had the privilege of going to San Diego for a long weekend. Prior to heading out, we stopped at his office to pick up a couple of books for me for some reading material. I don't know what I was thinking. I chose 8 books to take along. Seriously? We were going away for 4 days, including the drive time, which was in a convertible, I might add. As we left Phoenix, I thought about my biking goal. I kept my eyes wide open, doing some reconnaissance for my trip to San Diego on my bike. And you know, I felt really strong through Gila Bend and into Yuma, even until El Centro in California. No problem, it's pretty much flat. Maybe even slight downhill, and if you have a backwind, you're golden. But then after that, the first sign says there's a 10-mile uphill. And you're supposed to turn off your air conditioning because it's too steep for cars, let alone Elfie on her bike. All those downhills, because when you go up, you have to go down. My brake pads are way too skinny. I don't think I would make it. By the time I reached the outskirts of San Diego, my brake pads would be gone. And they don't have any bike lanes. And the traffic. Needless to say, as much as I wanted to change, be able to say, yeah, I rode my bike from Phoenix to San Diego, I love my life more. It's no longer my goal. Back to the books. One of the books I started to read was Not God Enough by J.D. Greear. The subtitle is Why Your Small God Leads to Big Problems. We want to understand God more than we want to trust him. The temptation is to create a slightly bigger, slightly smarter God than we are, so we can make sense of all the weirdness in the world. And when our slightly bigger, only slightly smarter God doesn't do things the way we think he should, it's really quite easy to step in and take over where he's really not doing his job. After all, there are areas where he's really not very competent and he's a little slow on the draw. Just like we do with our children, our spouse, our coworkers, or our employees. We're afraid to trust our kids because they may not do the job we've asked them to do with the excellence that we want. So rather than teach them, we just yell at them and do it ourselves. Or we're afraid to trust that our husband or wife will follow through with what they've said they will do. And when they don't do it in our timetable, we just do it ourselves and administer the silent treatment. We're afraid to trust the process of trying and failing and trying again. Sometimes we trust it for ourselves, though it's really embarrassing when you fail in public. So we don't really like to do that, but we especially make ourselves crazy trying to make things easier for our kids, wanting life to be better for them than it was for us. We want to fix them. We want to fight for them. We want to do for them because we want them to be shielded from the nastiness of life. We forget that we've been made stronger because of our difficult experiences. We forget that our failures have made us into the people that we are today. And me personally, I'm afraid to trust my bike. That those two impossibly skinny wheels mounted on this very lightweight aluminum frame won't crumple when I hit a bump in the road under my weight, and that the tires won't pop. God has a sense of humor, and this is a true story, by the way. On Friday, I had my first flat. The back tire. Exactly as I told it would be. No big blowout, no losing control, and there wasn't a cement truck in the vicinity. I called Brad, that's why you always carry your cell phone, and he kindly came to pick me up. I texted Rebecca, who came over a couple hours later to teach me how to change the tire on her bike. This was one of the biggest holdouts for my fear. I'm not afraid anymore. God is like that. He has that perfect balance of caring for us and letting us try things, some of which may not be so good for us. He knows we want to be independent, but he's willing to let us try. He's even willing to let us fail. He doesn't mind messy. He cares about who we're becoming in the process. He cares that we will increasingly become more like Jesus, so we will increasingly be mistaken for him. When I was a young mom, for a couple of years I was really into cross-stitch. In particular, there are these Amish scenes that I love to stitch. Pictures of barns, markets, horses and buggies. And I was told to make the back as neat as I could so when I frame my pictures, there wouldn't be bumps on the front. But I'm not that good. So forget about a flat back. It's a tangle of threads, a chaotic jumble of color without any possible semblance of order. But when you turned the canvas over, it was a beautiful picture, beautifully ordered. So too is the picture God is creating with our lives. We see messy, fear-inducing, chaotic jumbles of experiences. And one day, He's going to turn that canvas over so we can see His beautifully ordered tapestry of life, where we see how we brought glory to Him by trusting Him through the fear, despite our failures, because we can see then that He's stitching the strands of our lives into a picture that's bringing Him glory. In this picture, it doesn't matter who we are. It only matters who God is. Over and again, God chose leaders we would classify as losers. Take Moses, for example. He killed a fellow Egyptian, and he hid in the desert where he wandered around for 40 years. Talk about a loser. He was still living in his father-in-law's basement at 80 years old. He was terrified to do the job that God asked him to do, but he did. Rahab, she was a prostitute who hid Israeli spies on her roof, converted to Judaism because she turned her back on her own people and she really had nowhere else to go, but she ended up as a mom in the lineage of Jesus. Esther, she was a simple Jewish orphan raised by her uncle, and she went through beauty treatments for a year before becoming queen. And then she risked her beautiful new life to save her people. Mary, the mom of Jesus, was just a young teenage girl. She was naive, but she trusted God, that God could possibly use her to raise the Messiah. God chooses empty vessels. Empty vessels or empty containers are not the tool. They are a conduit for God to work. Feeling inadequate or empty is a prerequisite to being used by God. He wants those He can fill and use. He doesn't really care to have the ones that say, pick me, I can do this. He wants those that are humble and available. Louis Giglio, Christian author and speaker, says the point is not to make you feel small. The point is to realize that we are small. He says that for every doubtful, but I'm not, that we can even imagine, God answers back with a resounding, I am. But I've made so many mistakes. I am. But my child isn't following Jesus. I am. I don't know what to do next. I am. I'm not really very good at that. I am. But I'm so afraid. I am. God's not limited by your inability. Neither your past failures or your current struggles hold Him back in the least. What He wants is that we lay those fears and insecurities at His feet. God wants us to remember that our confidence doesn't come from the awareness of our competence. He wants us to remember that our confidence comes from an awareness of His presence. What if Jesus' followers were the most trust-filled people in the world? They trusted Jesus to care for them. They trusted each other. They trusted that God's grace was enough, like a sheep trusts his shepherd. Let's go back to Psalm 23. Surely. I like to change that surely word to certainly or confidently. So this is how it sounds. So certainly, actually, let's go back. So certainly what? Certainly. If I am in the safety of the boundaries that the shepherd has set up for me. Certainly, if I am pulled back by the shepherd's hook when I've wandered too far. Certainly, if God prepares a table for me in the presence of my enemies, in the middle of my fear, and he anoints my head with oil like at a spa, where you feel warm and cozy and pampered and comfortable. Certainly, if God does all that, I can be confident that God's goodness and unfailing love will pursue me. Not only pursue me, it will chase me all the days of my life. And how could I ever choose to live anywhere else but with God in his house forever? Jesus, I am so grateful today that we don't have to be afraid, that we can live in the safety of your presence, that you will lead us and guide us, that you let us go through those messy experiences where we don't think that there might be any redemption from our mistakes, but you can use everything to make us know that you are God, and we will trust you no matter how afraid we are. I thank you that you are my shepherd. I thank you that I can be safe to be a sheep in your presence. Jesus, you are God, and I am grateful for you.